I made a post on Friday asking my connections on social media, on Instagram and on Facebook, who they thought was going to be the next brokerage to settle. So at this point, we know that Anywhere settled early on, Remax settled, then we had Keller Williams, then we had NAR, which did it about 2 weeks ago, or a little bit over a week ago, with that bombshell $418 million settlement. And on Friday, when I made that post, I was ready to actually record this video. And right as I was getting ready to record, it was announced that Compass settled for, I believe, $59.5 million. So I, essentially put this particular video on hold and addressed that one. But anyway, I made that post asking, hey, who is going to be next to settle? And a lot of agents just were not aware that this is really what's going on. It became clear a lot of agents don't necessarily understand what's happening right now currently with this particular situation. And rightly so, they're focused on selling real estate. But a lot of folks are under the impression that it's over. A lot of folks are under the impression that, hey, since NAR did what it did, then we're all good to go. Well, unfortunately, every single brokerage that you actually have heard of, there's going to be a settlement at this point. Now, there are mechanisms that we're going to talk about on how the settlement happens, but right now there's over 90 brokerages. Let's get into the story by Inman, courtesy of Inman.com. So we knew that there was going to be additional brokerages that end up settling. We don't necessarily know how many are going to end up settling, or the plaintiff's team or the attorney team is going to go after, but we do know roughly, based off of just public information, that 90 brokerages are not covered under the deal. Now, of course, most famously, we know that Home Services and all affiliated brokerages are not covered in the deal that was cut by NAR, because NAR and Home Services were actually both of the defendants in this case. So NAR couldn't do that for them because they were still in litigation. So we know most famously that Home Services was still involved, but we also understand that another carve-out in place, another mechanism that was in place, was the brokerages that had over $2 billion in sales. So let's go into this. So the proposed settlement, which has not received final approval from the court, would settle claims from a case known as Sitzer-Burnett, which, as well as others against NAR, for more than 1 million, or about 2/3 of its members, all state and local realtor organizations, all multiple listing services owned by the realtor associations, and all brokerages with an NAR member as principal that had a transaction, blah, blah, blah. So it's essentially saying who is covered. And basically, if you're a NAR member, you're pretty much good to go. Now, it doesn't matter if you're affiliated with these brokerages that we're about to address here. You as an individual, you are good to go. The corporate level, the LLC level, the incorporated level, so the actual entity, they are still gonna need to cut a large check, because that is something that the plaintiffs were absolutely adamant about. And it's so funny the way that there's a lot of one-liners here that really got to me. So this is one of them. The plaintiffs still wanted bigger companies to pay their share, according to Ketchmark, whose Ketchmark was Michael Ketchmark, the lead counsel for the attorney group that was representing the plaintiff side on the Sitzer-Burnett case. So according to the attorney, the plaintiffs still wanted bigger committees to pay their share. It was a plaintiff's, right? So it had nothing to do with the attorneys that brought this up, that are doing this on a contingency basis, that are going to collect over 40% of the judgment. Nothing to do with them at all. It's the plaintiffs. Heavy sarcasm, as you know. The focus is on large corporate real estate brokerages. So again, the corporate level, he said, that seemed to be the logical place for the cutoff. The biggest thing is that they need to agree to these practice changes, and they need to agree to change the way that they're doing business. Well, if NAR, which is essentially what most of these brokerages adhere to, or make a requirement for agents to join, well, if the changes have already been applied as in terms of the NAR, why are we trying to get another check, or why are we looking for the brokerages to do these particular changes when they know that the industry changes have already been happening or will be happening? Well, of course, it's because of money. We recognize that. Under this proposed settlement, well, these two, I'm not going to bring these up because we've talked about what these proposed settlements mean. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to read through that. If you're getting caught up on what the actual changes were. We've done 10, 12 videos on this already. So I just wanted to highlight that to give you an opportunity to read through that, to know what actually ended up changing. So as far as compensation can't be displayed on the MLS, we know that that's a big change. And we also understand that buyer representation agreements need to be executed before you show a home. That's essentially the major points that we needed to talk about. All right, so this goes into how the compensation is going to get paid. So essentially after 30 days, NAR will deposit, well, let's read through it because this one I was prepared to do on Friday. Regarding the $418 million NAR, NAR would have to fork over under the proposed settlement 30 days after the motion for preliminary approval of the settlement agreement is filed. NAR would deposit $5 million into an escrow account that would serve as a settlement fund. Should the settlement receive final approval, so once the court approves, NAR would have to deposit $197 million right out of the gate into the escrow within 90 days of that approval. Within 3 years of that $197 million payment, NAR would have to deposit $72 million per year into that account. So essentially $72 million per year. Crazy, right? However, this is where we get to the meat and potatoes of our particular article today. However, according to the almanac, again, this is public information, that the cells that are used to give the top brokerage award and all this other stuff. So this is all basically from the MLS and also from the brokerage side. They're reporting these numbers, so that could come back to bite them. 93 brokerages would not be automatically covered by NAR's deal. Among them, some of the biggest names in real estate. So basically any big name that you're aware of that you haven't heard already had a big settlement agreement is going to be named here. You have Compass, EXP, Douglas Elliman, Redfin, Howard Hanna, blah, blah, blah. All these others are not covered. So for the attorneys, but attorneys, their life gets even easier now. All they have to do is go to the almanac. All they have to go do and look at these public facing things and just go down the list. So all they have to do is go, let's see, Howard Hanna. Okay, Howard Hanna corporate office address. All right, get their corporate address, write a copy and paste it into their FedEx overnight account, and then fire off a Howard Hanna. I know I'm laughing, but essentially that's what's happening at this point. They're just going to go down the list, every single one of them, and just send off, hey, you've been named in this suit. And I'm scrolling through here to give you an idea of everybody. So of course, any major brokerage that you're aware of, that you've heard of before, is going to be named here. There's really no exceptions. Now, it's important to remember and remind you, agents that are members of NAR that have done a transaction up through 2022, if I'm not mistaken, you're covered. You as an individual, you personally, the LLC level, the incorporated level, the corporate level, that is not, they need to settle. So we actually have several of these folks that we are in talks with from our SaaS company from the agently side, which is interesting to see as well. All right, so there's a line here that once I get to it, I'll decide if I want to share this my personal story, but we'll get to it here very shortly. What I really wanted to highlight here was that every single day, brokerages are reaching out to us and setting up mediations or reaching resolutions for these cases. As you would expect, it takes time from time to time when we reach a settlement to where it gets finalized. So when agents are looking at that and wondering if they're covered, oftentimes they might be. It just hasn't made it to the list yet. So there's some reassurance from Mr. Michael, from Mr. Attorney. The proposed NAR deal includes a mechanism by which those affiliated with Home Services of America, whose companies are the only ones still fighting the Sitzer Burnett suit, can buy into the settlement. So essentially, you're going to be self-reporting, or the major brokers that you might be a part of, they're going to be self-reporting, and they're going to look at it. Think of it like the IRS. The IRS gives you some guidelines. The IRS gives you, if you make this amount, you need to send over this percentage of your income and include some deductions on that stuff here. So from this side, they've provided some benchmarks. They provide some ways to buy into the settlement, but it's going to be based off of sales volume. So you're going to be So the entities are going to look at how much sales they've had, and then they're going to multiply it times the percentage that you're going to see here shortly. And then it goes on to say, my phone is ringing off the hook is all I can say. Quite a few of these companies are publicly traded, so there's SEC regulations that are in place that govern what I can and can't say, and there's federal rules in the court system that govern what I can and can't say. So essentially it's asking, have brokerages themselves reached out to you because they know that you're coming, basically is what's happening. So here's where the formula comes in. So within 121 days after the NAR settlement is preliminarily approved by the court, deposit into an account, escrow account, an amount equal to 0.0025 multiplied by the brokerage's annual total transaction volume over the recent 4 calendar years. For instance, a brokerage with a $2 billion average annual total transaction volume would be required to pay $5 million. So you can just we can go back up here and see $2 billion times, or basically take the sales volume. The easiest way to do that would be take the amount divided by 2 and then multiply by 5. So that would be what they're expecting. That would be, if you're going to buy into it, that's what it ends up being. For a brokerage that has $2 billion annual total transaction volume, would be required to pay $5 million. Now, if you do the math on the most recent one, the Compass one, which is the first brokerage to settle after NAR, the math doesn't add up in that regard. So they actually got a discount, if you will, because if you do their volume, it would have been another $500 million settlement based off of what they ended up proposing here. So even though there's a mechanism, it's really the point that I want to highlight here, even though there's a mechanism to buy into the settlement, if they applied this formula, they would not have settled for $59.5 million, Compass that is. They would have had to settle for well north of that, 10 times more than that. So although there is a mechanism in place that NAR laid that roadmap on how to settle, that is not the mechanism that brokerages need to do, because under that math, just so we apply that math, if we do that math to another brokerage that I believe very soon is going to settle, and that's eXp Realty, if we apply that, I don't have my phone, I put it in the other room so I don't get distracted. Let me do public math real quick. If we do 165, let's just call it 160 million because I'm running blind here, $160 billion, and we divide that by 2 billion to get to the however many we need to do. What is that? 80 times 5. Am I doing that right? I think so. I'm not going to do that math. 165. Is that 80 billion? Oh, yeah, 160. Is that 80 million? Would that be it? Times 2. It would be a large amount. I know I'm not supposed to do public math, and that's why I exposed myself. All right, so either way, it still would be an obscene amount. It was not something that you would want to apply this particular factor altogether. All right. Now here is the trouble line for me. This is, when I read it, it just brought back so many flashbacks, and it's one of those throwaway lines that you wouldn't think about it all that much. So this is Mr. Kitchmark, the lead attorney, saying, I've been talking with a lot of the defense lawyers and a lot of the leadership in these brokerages, and I think it's important for them to know that NAR and the lawyers for NAR fought hard for them. It's a really good consolation prize, right? Knowing that, hey, the attorneys fought hard for you, right? They've put in a mechanism for them to reach a resolution. The folks that are out there who don't have a release, there's a vehicle set forth in the settlement with NAR for them to accomplish that. We're literally every day setting up meetings and scheduling mediations to get that accomplished. Hey, so they tried hard. There was there was some hard fought battles. So it's fog of war, right? So, you know, it really rubbed me the wrong way. Part of it was because of the way that in my previous life, I was in healthcare. And I'm not going to get into too many specifics, because there's I can't. So let's just say hypothetically there was a 3-letter agency that was, we're jeopardizing one of our businesses, or one key part of our business and the way that we could operate business. Sound familiar? Even though we were in the right, we had all the clearance, we had all the licenses, we had everything. We were actually leading the industry at that point in time with what we were doing. And I mean, I say that, I know I'm biased, but I say that to the letter. We were following everything except this 3-letter agency that came out to us did not see it the same way. So although we had an in-house attorney, we had to hire another in-house. So keep in mind, we had the CEO, and then myself, I was the COO, and then we had a CFO that was actually an attorney as well. So we actually were paying so much to attorneys at that time, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, sometimes per month, that we ended up hiring one of the lead attorneys from that particular entity that was representing us from that law firm, and they became an in-house counsel for us. So that wasn't enough. We had to go out and get another office, another attorney group to represent us against this 3-letter agency. I'm sharing way too much than I probably should be here. But really what I wanted to highlight in this regard is that these attorneys do play nice with each other when they want to, and they look out for each other when they want to. And this whole little notion of, hey, I've been talking to a lot of the defense lawyers and a lot of the leadership in these brokerages, and I think it's important for them to know that NAR and the lawyers for NAR fought hard for them. I don't believe that for a second. I believe, how can we maximize this to increase our pocketbooks? Now, I understand that these attorneys have fiduciary duties for their respective entities or their respective sides. But at the end of the day, I do believe that here it's if we're, I don't want to send any accusations out there, but just seeing how these attorney groups, like in our particular case, back in my healthcare days, how these two attorneys from the I was almost going to say from a 3-letter agency, and our attorneys, how they were getting ready to basically close up shop in the way that we were doing business. And the only thing that kept us in business at that time, this is really getting the flashbacks that I'm getting, the only thing that kept us in business at that time was that we had information that we had collected legally. And let's just say hypothetically, there was a recording out there that one of us was fortunate enough to have, of a certain situation that kept us afloat, if you will. So until that information was brought out, both attorney groups, not just the 3-letter agency, but also the one that would represent us, both attorney groups completely changed tune. Everything was already going against our way, but until that information came out and that we had something that was very, very compromising for one entity, we'll say that, and it was very, very good for another entity, we'll say that, until that came out, the entire thing changed. We were already positioned to like absolutely lose millions and millions and millions of dollars. But until that came out, both tunes changed, and it was over like that. It was absolutely game over instantly. So that immediately brought me back to this particular point, immediately brought me back to that, and understanding how some attorney, not everybody, but how some attorneys operate, and everyone's looking out for their best interest, and it's not necessarily for their client's best interest. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that the NAR, I guess in a way, but the NAR side or this other side were working against their client's best interest. But I think that when you're looking at it from what's happened, I do believe that not everybody was actually, the people that were supposed to be protected, at the end, they weren't protected on all fronts. Well, let me know what you think. Let me know who is going to be next. I was so sure that home services was going to settle last week, but I lost that battle. So I'm full confident now. Now let's take number 2. I still think home services is going to be the next one that settles, and then I think that EXP is going to be the second one. So we'll see what happens. Let me know in the comment section down below what your guess is.